Uh, I can start. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the meeting of the working group focused on sustainable screenwriting. Our working group is part of the Screenwriting Research Network. Today we have a lecture by Kirsi Reinola entitled Putting Writing into Words, a Microphenomenological Approach to Imagination in Screenwriting. Kirsi is a writer, researcher, and educator. She is currently a PhD student at Aalto University in Finland. And if I'm not mistaken, today's lecture is based on her PhD research. Before we begin, I would like to remind everyone that today's meeting is recorded. And if you have any questions, there will be time for them after the lecture. I won't keep you waiting any longer. Kirsi, you may begin.
So thank you, Jan. I was prepared to introduce myself, but Jan did it already. Well, just addition to that, I could say that I'm an early stage researcher at Enactive Virtuality Lab in Tallinn University too at the moment. So I will be doing some microphenomenological work there with film professionals, to be short. So that's pretty much it. And now the primary focus of my PhD study is on understanding how screenwriters navigate their imaginative landscapes and the various elements that inform their creative decisions. My current microphenomenological research aims to generate insights into the emotional and cognitive as well as enactive dynamics presented during the writing process, particularly how different prompt contexts, for example, in our case, it could be the context of ecological screenwriting may shape the writer's experience. So I was prompted a short introduction to my study, but then Jan sent the invitation that said our meeting would be 2 hours. So, well, I hope my presentation fills the amount of time that is convenient and best for us. Probably this will take an hour. So I suggest that we go through my presentation, maybe take a break and then discuss the topic of the day, if that's okay. And I also suggest that if you have questions, they could be saved after my presentation, if that is all right. And because I'm sharing here, I won't be see your reactions really, so maybe I could assist as a moderator here in this meeting. And me being in the middle of my data analysis work right at the moment, quite deep into it, I hope we could discuss how the microphenomenological research method could be applied in exploring approaches to making writing more ecological. Given that microphenomenology is basically studying the human experience, how do you see microphenomenology could be used in the study of eco-writing? So this is the prompt I will give you now in the beginning of this lecture. Okay, so first I'd like to start by shortly introducing how and especially why I got here studying the screenwriter's imagination. Making this presentation for you was actually a very good process for me, because since only now I realized that in my article in General Scandinavian Cinema from 22 is where I laid the cornerstones for my current research. The socially and environmentally sustainable screen storytelling has been in the center of my interests all along. This was a commissioned article by Women in Film and Television Finland and Aalto University Film School, and it was before I had started doing my own doctoral research. Even though this article, Violence Against Women in Contemporary Finnish Audiovisual Fiction, the decision-making process was about gendered violence, I think I could replicate this study today by merely changing the word women into nature and believe the results would be somewhat similar. My claim is representing fictional violence, and today I would add representing environmental exploitation, normalizes real-life violence and exploitation. The imagery we present greatly influences what people think and feel about themselves and the world. And we are not moving in a good direction in this sense. Although the harmful effects of violent entertainment are an on and off topic of discussion, Aalto Jokinen, who was a gender studies scholar and men's rights activist, wrote insightfully that it has not yet been suggested that the question is also about violence directed at viewers by television and film production or distributing companies with the aim of economic gain. We can only hope that in the future, the makers and distributors of this kind of material will be held liable in the same way as tobacco companies and be required to compensate for the economic benefits they receive from spreading an exploitative attitude toward nature or people and animals for that matter. The article was based on two types of material. The first consisted of dramaturgical analysis of 8 scenes or sequences in 4 Finnish audiovisual fiction. The second set of data was interviews I conducted and questionnaire answers I analyzed from screenwriters, financiers, producers, directors, actors, and other decision makers involved in the making of the scenes. The semi-structured interview questions concerned the significance of the scene for the plot and character, if an alternative to the scene had been considered at some point of the production, and how they felt when writing or reading the scene from the script. What emotions surfaced and what emotions did they not notice in themselves during the reading? So one of the most significant results of my study was that based on the response data, no alternative narrative solutions were ever considered for scenes containing brutal violence. In the answers, none of the respondents addressed this question. They either did not remember, skipped the question, or did not understand it. None of the respondents questioned or wondered why the battered or dead young woman was part of the story. No one remembered or reported whose initiative it was. Only one respondent cited the world view of the writer. According to the answers, the financiers or producers did not make dramaturgical decisions either. Their role was not to address the drama content, make artistic decisions, or approve drafts of the script, since according to their answers, creative control is always in the hands of the production crew. The decision-making was externalized to a pool or a panel that in turn could be anonymous. A significant finding was that the respondents' choices almost always were determined by some previously set constraint. Drama scripts take on a life of their own, evolve significantly throughout the production cycle, and are oftentimes treated as raw material. Screenwriters may not be able to recall how much of the material they produced was included in the final script, filmed, and eventually screened, and how much of it was removed from the script or ended up on the cutting room floor. As a result, the individuals who made crucial decisions on the storyline, the themes, and the genre were nowhere to be found. Their silence was deafening. So my study source material presented thematically very challenging issues that can be examined from a social moral point of view. Given the extraordinary brutal violence in the material, it was remarkable that a large subset of respondents answered that they did not remember what they felt or thought while making the violent scenes. Still, controversially, several respondents reported identification with either the protagonist, the victim, or the perpetrator. This controversy sparked my curiosity for my PhD research. Timo Argelander, a then managing partner of a private equity investor in the Finnish film industry, stated in Finnish gender equality seminar held by Aalto University in 2022 that ethical and socially sustainable audiovisual productions are bit by bit making headway in the Nordic countries. But the problem lies in the big AV production buyers and streaming companies in international markets. The buyers and streaming companies are not interested in more gender equal content. As Argelander emphasized, the buyers are mainly old school men. Screenwriters do not have a say in the productions at large. I hope we can discuss after my presentation if it's really how Argelander puts it. Are solely the buyers and streaming companies to blame? How more ecological audiovisual storytelling could be promoted. And this was my first study in my PhD work. And this article on decision making and violence. This article I presented before on decision making and violence left me curious about what happens in the writer's imagination in the moment of writing and making those narrative decisions. This was the beginning of my dissertation work, as I said. So in my next article, Emotional Transportation and Identification in Screenwriting, I started to rehearse and learn my newly found true methodological love, the micro-phenomenological method, which I will return to in a minute. Focusing on the artistic practice of screenwriting, I wanted to know about the presence of character identification or emotional transportation in the solitary screenwriter's creative imagination during the writing process. So I do not study writer's room, dramaturgy, or teaching aspects of screenwriting, although microphenomenology could be applied to them too. I couldn't find descriptions of character identification in the screenwriting literature, but a few. In one paper, Siri Senje from 17 describes her screenwriting process for her script September, where she placed herself inside the minds and locations of her characters, spying, listening, watching, and occasionally acting out situations. In Joel Engel's book, Screenwriters on Screenwriting, which is pretty old, from 95, Ted Talley, who was writing Clarice Starling, character Clarice Starling in The Silence of the Lambs, and Bruce Joel Rubin, who is the writer of, for example, Ghost and Jacob's Ladder, they both describe entering the character's perspective, intuiting and telling the story from inside the character. So I began to wonder if the predominant advice, show, don't tell, in the screenwriting instructional books that emphasize cinematic evocation of the story is partly the reason for this lack of studies on the writer's identifications. There are some mentions in literature, mostly from the audience perspective. Ken Danziger and Jeff Rush write about character identification in narratives focusing on audience empathy, but not on the screenwriter's identification. Similarly, Finnegan emphasizes audience engagement, noting that manuals rarely address the writer's own emotional transportation. Eaglestrom links narrative theory, particularly Genet's focalization, to screenwriting, while Oatley notes that third-person narrative promotes spectatorship and first-person promotes identification. So across domains, identification is framed mainly in terms of the audience, not the writer. Given this gap, insights from psychology and communication studies became relevant in my study. Research on readers show how emotional transportation enhances empathy towards characters. Readers identify with protagonists only when emotionally transported. Immersion increases cognitive and emotional engagement and vivid imagery. Empathy itself has cognitive and affective dimensions. Cognitive empathy involves perspective taking. Affective empathy involves immersion in another's experience. Cross and others further define empathy as emotional response, alignment of emotional states, and mutual awareness, which they call empathic creativity, supported by imitation. Recognizing the lack of studies on the artistic practice and empathic creativity of screenwriting, I conducted an exploratory study to assess emotional transportation and character identification in the solitary screenwriter's imagination during the writing process. In my study, the experience was a writing task, and this became the focus of the exploration. The writers were given a prompt, a writing assignment, in which the writers were asked to take a character they know well and put the character in a cafeteria, sitting by the table and looking out the window, sipping coffee while waiting for someone. So the prompt itself gave a lot of constraints already in the get-go. 4 professional screenwriters were interviewed with microphenomenological interview. The shortness of the writing task, which was 2 minutes, was justified to be able to go deep into the details in the writing experience. By that time, I wrote this article. I was not sufficiently trained in this method, and therefore the microphenomenological analysis was out of the question. So I conducted a thematic analysis, and I was seeking mainly inspiration from the MP analysis model. My results indicated preliminary findings in emotional transportation, identification, and eureka moments in screenwriting practice. In the data, both identification and transportation occur strongly in screenwriters. The results show that emotional transportation into a scene produces vivid imagery and detailed descriptions. Also, a cautious finding could be that a third-person narrator emerges in pressing writing situations. Writers see and sense the scene in more detail than they are consciously aware of, and their imagination operates so quickly that many details are immediately forgotten or even not noticed while writing. Following Oatley, fluctuation of point of view allows writers to balance being with the character and being the character, modulating identification. I call this fluctuation distributed foci. A preliminary observation is that transportation is induced by a feeling of security generated by the assignment limitations, the time, character, location, and action, of which all delimit the variables. During the task, writers reported feeling relaxed after the initial feeling of pressure. Actually, I just remembered one of my informants panicked in the beginning of the task because the character didn't drink coffee. So she had to cook up something completely different in that one. But it was actually, it was the most imaginative scene of all the 4 after all. So that is also, I think, kind of one proof of limitations being very good for your imagination. Yeah, so my data also suggested that eureka moments and transportation are separate phenomena. Eureka moments often occur under pressure without transportation and are linked to the writer's tacit dramaturgical knowledge and familiarity with the fiction. Also, the debriefing sessions after the interviews reveal that writers gain conscious awareness of their own dramaturgical methods and knowledge. The speed of thought in writing creates a translation from images to language problem, a big challenge in screenwriting. We can return to this in our discussion if you wish. The data also suggests that the higher pressure can produce more original dramaturgical solutions, and this was the example I just told you, which writers often call Eureka moments. However, this results needs more research to be confirmed. Constraints appear to facilitate quick and strong transportation also, providing both pressure and a sense of safety, a sandbox for creative play. As a pilot study, my research opened new windows onto the artistic process of screenwriters. Weaknesses of the study include the small sample of 4 informants and the novelty of the research method to me as a researcher. So now, the primary focus of my current study and paper is on further investigating the imaginative processes of screenwriters and understanding how screenwriters navigate their mental landscapes and the various elements that inform their creative decisions. I'm now fully trained in microphenomenology, so I can pretty confidently do the analysis too. And hopefully my study further reveals the potential of microphenomenology as method to explore and put into words the creative processes of screenwriting. Creativity in screenwriting involves complex, layered experiences of imagination and immersion, and the traditional research methods struggle to capture the nuanced cognitive and affective shifts that occur during the writing process. And as a reminder, I'd like to consider how this research method might be applied in exploring approaches of making screenwriting more ecological. So, for example, could this method be used in different prompt contexts, for example, and then the screenwriters would be interviewed, given a prompt and interviewed, and what would that produce, maybe? So, what is microphenomenology? I will shorten this MP from now on, so it will shorten the lecture a little. So, MP gives an intriguing new design for studying the screenwriter's artistic process. In art, in general, the emergence of a creative idea seems to remain an unsolved mystery. So MP provides detailed depictions of fleeting instances of subjective experience, offering a systematic protocols for comparison, covering an interview and analysis technique. It is developed by Claire Petit-Mangeon under the guidance of her PhD supervisor, Francisco Varela, within the Neurophenomenological Research Program. The method offers an answer to the limitations with only studying physiological activities when studying the human mind, body, and psyche. It highlights the need for a disciplined methodology that dives into human experience. According to Petit-Mangeon, the microphenomenological interview method is based on the observation that a significant amount of our experiences often goes unnoticed, whether we are engaging in activities like seeing, listening, imagining, remembering, understanding, or making decisions. A considerable portion of these activities, even though they are subjectively lived, cannot be immediately accessed by consciousness or expressed through words. We go through these experiences, but in a way that goes unrecognized or unnoticed or happens before conscious reflection. What is especially surprising is our lack of awareness about this lack of awareness. And this poses the initial challenge in becoming conscious of this overlooked dimension. Since our lived experience is the most personal and intimate thing about us, we think that we are familiar with it, and we cannot imagine for a moment that we could fail to perceive it or be misled about it. Yet the spontaneous descriptions we provide of our experience, whether they are sensory, emotional, or cognitive, are usually very poor. Actually worse. Many studies show that our awareness is not only very partial, but biased, and that we are often wrong when we try to describe it. But micro-phenomenology allows us to describe finely these processes, especially the attentional, emotional, and bodily dimensions of perception, imagination, memorization, or ideation. Currently, microphenomenology finds application in the examination of lived experiences across diverse fields of study. It is being used as an independent method or together with other approaches such as neurophenomenology. Its practical applications hold a wide range of areas, including studying writer's block, clinical investigations, and technology. Microphenomenology reveals that ideas cannot be reduced to their content, but they have a genesis that is rooted in bodily experience. I go back to my theme of emotions for a second. Considering that the current methods of studying emotions are mainly based on theoretical models that assume predefined ideas about what emotional experience is, we need to ask, is this really the right way to study emotion? The same goes to cognition. The enactive approach proposes that cognition arises from the interaction of brain, body, and environment, a view that reframes current approaches. In their book, The Embodied Mind from 1991, Varela and his co-authors argue that cognition is not merely a computational process that occurs in isolation or in the brain. Enactive perspective emphasizes that mental processes are deeply rooted in bodily experience and actions. The authors remind us that every thought arises from a subtle movement in the body, a shift in posture, breath, or sensation, meaning that thinking and feeling never is disembodied, but always enacted through our living system. One of the main ideas of the enactive approach is that lived experience is a fundamental element in the scientific study of the mind. That said, what now links the theme of this presentation, the ecological aspects of screenwriting, to microphenomenology even further is a thought, a quote from Claire Petit-Mangean in her lecture in 2024. Our way of life and the ecological devastation it is bringing about is intimately linked to our blindness to our experience. A retrieving contract with our experience is thus the precondition that would allow us to regain our lucidity, our dignity, and the courage to change our model of society. I will now explain the microphenomenological method in somewhat fine detail, since I feel that understanding what kind of data it gives, it needs to be looked at quite closely. This is not a conventional qualitative method. So the objective of the microphenomenological interview is to obtain detailed descriptions of single experiences, focusing on the process dimension and from an embodied perspective. To achieve this, it is necessary when conducting a MP interview to guide the interviewee towards the evocation of a targeted experience. Evocation can be described as the process of coming into sensory motor contact with one's past experience. This means recalling the experience with sensory features it contains, that is the visual, auditory, kinesthetic perceptions, internal sensations, etc., and motor features it contains, that is the movements, muscle tone, or other signals that may explain sympathetic or parasympathetic activity. Thus, with a range of specific tools, the interviewer helps the interviewee to unravel and describe a given experience. In the interview, the experience being explored can be defined in different ways. It can be an experience that just happened, an intentionally provoked experience, or a memory from the past, that is an invoked experience. Here's the outline of the interview process. I walk through this very briefly. I don't know if you see the texts, but in the first box it says, the first step is establishing the interview agreement that includes the ethical agreement, since we are dealing with possibly very personal experiences. The interview that the interview may not be aware of in the beginning of the interview. It gives the interviewer the possibility to stop the interview anytime they choose. Then we go about choosing or eliciting an experience. Then the interviewer starts to guide the interviewee into an evocation state and collects the first overall diachronic experience. And here it's important to help both the interviewer and the interviewee to identify the start and end of the experience, since the analysis is a lot about the timeline. Then by repetition, we refine the description, going into smaller moments in the experience. Here, the absence of inductive questions from the interviewer, such as judgments, interpretations, or suggestions, is very important. We direct the interviewee's attention to the structure of the experience, the how, not the content, by asking what. We only use the question how. How do you know that you feel that sensation in your throat, for example? The most important aspect is repetition. The interviewer repeats as literally as possible what the interviewer has reported, thereby guiding the interviewee deeper into the evocation state. The interviewer then selects the moments of the report that are most relevant to the research question, and as neutrally as possible asks how the interviewee knows, sees, hears, or experiences the moment. In the end, during an interview that often lasts about an hour, only a few seconds of the actual experience may be explored in detail. I later come to a report of 2 experiences, and I think they both were about probably 2 seconds of the whole experience. Here the interview is helped to refocus from the satellite dimensions, the context, goals, judgments, beliefs, or theoretical knowledge, to the experience itself. That is the how, not the what. Screenwriters often stray during the interviews and start to talk about the knowledge and judgment satellites, since they realize often during the interview they realize how they came up with the dramaturgical solution, or how they used their tacit dramaturgical knowledge without them being aware of it while doing the task. That information they give in these reports is actually very interesting, but it's not microphenomenological data to be analyzed. So I can save it later and for example, analyze it with other methods. So with using verbatim repetitions, the interviewee's reports, I deepen the interviewee's evocation state. I write down the utterances the interviewer uses to strengthen their evocation and going deep into the experience. After an hour, the memory of the experience usually fades, so that the interviewee easily begins to fabricate details, and that is the moment to stop the interview. And then in the end, I reformulate the whole interview to the interviewee and bring them back to the present moment. The research question in my recent study is, how does the experience of reading a scene in the screenwriter's own script unfold? In these interviews, first I read the participants' own script. They were scripts for a feature or a short film. I picked one scene that felt important to me as a reader. I recall I even cried in two of the scripts or during that scene. So they felt important. And that was my criteria for choosing the prompt scene on each script. In the interview, the prompt for the participant was reading that scene in their own script, and then right after I interviewed the experience of reading it. And you have to mind here that we are examining the moment of reading the scene in one's own script, not writing it, because that's a different experience, and that could be evoked experience, but then we would study the memory of the writing of it and not writing of it. So you have to be quite careful there. So, microphenomenological analysis. The analysis procedure proposed by Valenzuela Mogiansky and Vasquez Rosati. Which I forgot to put here, but I can send the literature list later. Interviews are transcribed verbatim using orthographic transcription. This captures words, relevant sounds, pauses, and markers of spoken language. And here is a chart of the procedure of the transcription, which is very detailed. And you need the video recording also from the interview, because the interviewee's gestures that clarify the experience are important, and they also often show the bodily location without naming it in the interview is also then can be noted in the transcript. It's very demanding, actually, but it also allows me to start engaging analytically with the material. And note the preliminary observations, also about the depth and adequacy of the evocation. The more there are seconds in the pauses, the usually deeper in the evocation state the interviewee is. So irrelevant information is set aside. Also the satellite information, since the microphenomenology focuses on embodied procedural descriptions of the singular experiences. So the MP analysis is a process of abstraction, comparison, and representation, and its objective is to identify the invariance and variance of a given experience. I'm sorry, there is a discussion there somewhere. I muted it, I hope. The analysis aim is to distinguish the structure or the structural aspects of a given experience based on the diachronic and synchronic dimensions as analytic axes. So in my case, from the transcripts of the interviews, I will trace both similarities and differences across the reports and gradually build categories. I will do this using two analytics dimensions, the diachronic that refers to how the experience evolves in time, and the synchronic dimension which refers to how the experience is characterized at a given moment, or how a certain aspect of the experience is characterized. So actually we have two analyses, the temporal and the within moment. The temporal diachronic analysis focuses on the phases of progression of the lived experience, how it develops step by step. The synchronic analysis examines the texture of a given moment, the sensations, perceptions, and intentions that coexist in that instant. By gradually comparing these dimensions, I construct categories that make the experiential structure more explicit. So my next goal is to identify which parts of the interview material will actually be used in the analysis. Some parts of the transcript are relevant and others not. To create a proper procedural description, the interviewee must refer to one specific concrete moment in the experience. When reviewing the transcript, I exclude certain parts, for instance, general statements about the experience or sentences where the interviewer uses indefinite pronouns like one instead of I. And here we come to the satellites too, so we exclude those from the analysis. And this is how I go about extracting the experiential data from the satellites from the interview transcript. Then I will start using Excel sheet, and this is very refined technology, really. So and here I group the utterances because the chronology of the interview does not align with the chronology of the described experience, because we go during the interview, we pick some moment and go deeper into that. The first step of the diachronic analysis is to arrange the selected utterances according to the actual sequence of the experience. So I treat this resequencing as part of the diachronic analysis itself. It's just not data preparation because it already requires initial separation of the description into meaningful units and their reorganization. The first concrete step in resequencing the description is the identification of the different moments of the experience, which are here marked. Here you can see the moments 5, 6, and 7. And here I have reorganized the utterances because here are the line numbers, the interview line numbers, so that we can always go back to that moment of the interview. So, and this is well, sorry. So during this phase of my analysis, I posted on social media this picture that illustrates my feeling trying to figure out what is the true timeline in the experience. Here is the quality of my interview skills also very much measured, since if I don't ask during the interview in exactly which moment the reported experience happens in, it is very hard to pinpoint later. Sometimes the moment is impossible to define, since even if asked, the interviewee does not know the exact moment. Nevertheless, I can include this hesitation into my report too. So then I go about going iteratively through the data again and again to identify the smaller and smaller fragments of the experience as it unfolds over time. At this point, I name the diachronic units that make up the temporal structure of the experience, its phases, subphases, and even sub-subphases. I associate objects into collections without having previously defined the class or category to which they belong. As you probably understand, this is distinct from classification, where I would assign an instance to an already established category. Okay, so and during this process, I group these moments, forming IDUs, which grouping into them clusters that are called the incipient diachronic units, which can be even further divided into smaller moments. The interrogation process also serves as to reveal the possible hinge point between one diachronic unit and the next, and the hinge point here is marked with green in the slide. The hinge point, sometimes termed a transitional event, is what fundamentally marks the transition between units. It typically corresponds to actions and processes as well as to events, or even the absence of an expected event. My research question: how does the experience of reading a scene in the screenwriter's own script unfold? Guides how I name the units, of course. I will shorten here a little to save you. Two or more diachronic units can also happen at the same time. For example, a person might describe feeling certain sensations while performing an action or carrying out two actions simultaneously. But they belong later to something called the synchronous structure of a diachronic unit. So this is the visuals of my informant number 2, screenwriter 002. Once I've organized my diachronic units hierarchically, the next step is to represent the structure to actually make it visible. In this interview with the screenwriter 2, the scene was about two characters going into a room in a senior home, trying to steal a rocking chair from, to them, a now old man, which the writer calls Grandpa. The grandpa lies on the bed, sleeping, but awakens when the characters enter the room. To cover their actions, the other stealing character, a lady, lays her hand over the grandpa's forehead, and the grandpa asks if she is his mother. And here you can see the phases of the experience of reading that scene in the screenwriter's his own script. And the phase 1 would be sensing the sound, smells, and atmosphere of the scene. And the hinge point or transition would be following the characters and the emotion. Phase 2 would be seeing the scene with a mixed feeling. The transition would be when Grandpa awakens, which induced a memory of situating this experience within the scene, a memory in the screenwriter. Then the next transition would be Grandpa surprises, and that is Grandpa surprises the writer in that experience, and the writer feels joy of that decision he had made in the script. And then the informant, the screenwriter, reports going to a childhood experience, identification with Grandpa. And then transition would be the delight at the comedic aspect of that scene in the screenwriter, and the phase 5 would be pride in the quality of that scene he had written. So he was content with the quality. The act of this representation forces me to confront things I might have missed before, or to clarify decisions that were a bit fuzzy in my analysis. Then I did the same to all the 4 interviews, and then you can put them in one Excel sheet and try to identify the generic diachronic structure. So I am essentially comparing the diachronic units across all interviews. This comparison forms the basis for understanding the common structure of the experience under study. And because these structures are generally linked to a common external frame, I will put the end start point and the end point of the experience also in this picture, where they start to read the scene, and when they start to reading the scene, which are here in this light blue color in that chart. And then I will compare the various stages during the various interviews, and I will try and make it a general experience with same phases, which is always a little rough job. So this is what I've done so far, and I will think I think I will need to do this again. I will have to look more closely into the structure. But I pick from the interviews and the phases and from the titles of the phases and the units, and try to see which could fall into the same phase. And this is what I've done with the 4 interviews so far, which is too simple, I think, but this is something to start from, going maybe a little bit closer to the analysis. So in the 4 interviews, there are these common phases of seeing and sensing the scene, a mixed feeling, then some kind of transition. There is a memory how the scene was born, and then they are in every interview, there's transporting into the character, and in the end there's some kind of evaluation of the scene, both cognitively and emotionally. So so this is the procedure for the diachronic analysis, very roughly. And then I think that the real power of this method lies in the synchronic analysis. The goal of the synchronic analysis is to understand the structure of an experience at a specific moment. Usually, synchronic analysis follows the diachronic analysis because we need to define the moments before we can examine them in depth. This is the synchronic analysis of the phase 3, transporting into the character and the character's emotion in Screenwriter 2, with the grandpa. Here too, I'm looking at how the different aspects of the experience and the research question and objectives guide me in deciding which moments or aspects of the experience I analyze and to what level of detail. And then I rearrange the utterances again, but now by topic. And with the same kind of iterative analysis, I will try and find and figure out the ISU, the incipient synchronic units, first level of abstraction, second or even third level of abstraction. And this is where I end. This is one way of representing an experience of a screenwriter, the semantic network. So my research question again, how does the experience of reading a scene in the moment of transporting into the character and their emotion, which was in the diachronic analysis was the phase 3. I look into closer here. The classification operation is here is presented by the downward arrows from the categories down to the utterances, which are marked by line numbers down there. And the generalization operation is represented by the upward arrows from the most specialized to the more general category. So in here, this is the screenwriter number 1. In this scene, 2 female characters, Anne and Maria, are asleep in the same bed in a youth home. Frightening whispers start coming from behind the door, mocking Maria. Anne awakens, looks frightened toward the sound. The whispers grow louder and more threatening. Anne whispers back, asking them to stop, then offers herself instead of Maria. Take me, not her. The whispers continue, now mocking Anne. Anne stands up and walks toward the door, drawn by the voices. Before she can touch the handle, it moves on its own and opens. She steps into the dark hallway and the door closes behind her. So, and I'm asking, how does the experience of transporting into the character and the character's emotion unveil here? The category, so it's consisted, to my analysis, it's consisted of 4 categories: emotion, cognition, seeing, and location. The category emotion is defined by subclasses, categories of being inside the character's emotional state. Can you see the texts in my slides at all? I hope you can. No answer, okay. I hope you can. Going into the emotion, being caught in the emotion. And I will now read you the report for the categories and their subclasses as presented in the semantic network of Screenwriter 1 and the phase number 3, transporting into the character and the character's emotion. Being inside the character's emotional state. The interviewee specifies that in that moment, it is more about being inside the character Anne, inside the emotional state. It is not so much visual, not as if every single tiny facial expression of the character would be seen, but rather that the interviewee is somehow within the feeling itself. Going into the emotion. The interviewee goes into the emotion, into the worry, the fear. Anne is being worried about Maria. There is a kind of small panic, the feeling that one must quickly make a decision about what to do. The movement is toward entering the state of worry and urgency. Being caught in the emotion. The interviewer feels more caught in the emotion than in any visual expression of it. The emotional experience seems stronger. then the visual one, the engagement is more with the feeling than with what is seen. Then the category cognition, with the subclass category awareness of being behind the character's eyes. The interviewee describes knowing in a way that is difficult to explain that she is behind the character's Anne's eyes. It feels almost literal, as if the character's eyes were here in front and the interviewee's own perspective slightly behind them. She can see everything that the character sees. It feels as if her own eyes were about 10 centimeters behind the character's eyes, oddly inside the character's head, and from there she somehow knows. The awareness is both visual and cognitive at once. Category seeing, a subclass category imagining the emotion through seeing. The experience unfolds through a kind of a visual perception through seeing. The interviewee uses this visual aspect to imagine what it would feel like to be in that situation. The seeing supports the imaginative. Feeling, subclass category seeing from behind the character's eyes. The interviewee looks from a position just behind the character's eyes, as if sharing the same viewpoint, but remaining slightly separate. This behind the eyes seeing gives a sense of closeness without full identification. And there is this subclass category seeing. Seeing the character as a vague black entity. The character Anne appears in front of the interviewee in the moment of seeing from behind the character's eyes, not in a cinematic way, but more as a dim, dark, and vague entity, a kind of shadowy presence rather than a clearly visualized person. The figure is sensed rather than seen, as if character so close that it cannot be seen clearly. In that same moment, in the interviewee's mind, it looks as if she was some kind of demon possessing the character right there, extremely close. The proximity is so intense that the character cannot be seen clearly. The image is blurs because of the closeness. And the last subclass category in seeing is seeing oneself behind the character's eyes. The interviewee sees herself as positioned slightly behind the character's eyes, as if her own side were layered just behind the character's vision. She sees everything the character sees, yet from her own distinct internal distance. And in the location category, experience of moving into the character's place. The interviewer feels that in that moment she moves, not completely, but partly into the Anne character's position. It is as she shifts behind the character's eyes. And she still remains a little outside. And at times that experience feels almost literal. She moves from an external cinematic viewing position into this partial embodiment, as if temporarily occupying the character's location in the scene. And these are sometimes overlapping the reports also. And that's why I put the reiterated in the next subclass category, seeing from behind the character's eyes, where the interviewee depicts in slightly another words how she watches the behind the character's eyes, not as the character, but very close, almost touching that perspective. And again, in seeing oneself behind the character's eyes, another reiterated location report, which is pretty much the same as in the initial utterance from seeing category. Okay, this was the Screenwriter 1 semantic network, and this is the scene from that scene with the grandpa. In the Screenwriter 2, if you remember, the scene was about two characters going into a room in a senior home trying to steal a rocking chair. The grandpa awakens with the characters, and when the characters in the room, the lady character lays her hand over the grandpa's forehead, and the grandpa asks if she is his mother. In the interview, the screenwriter goes into a childhood memory while remembering where the scene and grandpa reaction came from. It was a memory of trying to get validation from the writer's own mother as a young boy. This is the semantic network for his experience in the face transporting into the character and character's emotion. I will analyze the category emotion last, even though it's first here in the picture, so it will more easily keep you up with the story. So there is a class of identification, category identification, cognitive identification. The interviewee perceives the grandpa as someone whose mind has started to wander, returning to a childlike state, which often happens when one becomes demented. In that childlike state of the old man, the interviewee recognizes his own experience of childhood. Throughout the character, the old man's inner child connects with the interviewee's own memories, and the experience becomes intertwined. He sees the grandpa as tired, alone, and perhaps frightened. The old man no longer has power over anything. He is helpless without agency. That helplessness, loneliness, and exhaustion moved the interviewee deeply. He recognizes himself in him, perhaps not directly, but still unmistakably, and he senses himself mirrored in the old man's condition. Subclass embodied identification. The identification is located physically in his chest and stomach, in the interviewee's chest and stomach. It is not a cramp, but more like an ache, a kind of suffocating, overwhelming feeling. It brings the interviewee a bodily impulse to comfort and protect, to take the old man into his arms, the interviewee arms, and say that everything will be all right. There is a wish to soothe, to guard, and to hold. The interviewee feels a bodily urge to touch and to offer comfort. The sensation is strongest around the heart, radiating toward the pit of the stomach. The interviewee's hands tingle slightly, carrying an intention to do something, to reach out, but he cannot or may not. The impulse remains unacted, lingering in his body, a quiet ache of compassion. Category seeing, seeing himself. In the moment when the grandpa says, "I am a good boy, aren't I?" the interviewee sees himself as a small child looking up at his own mother. The mother appears larger, higher, a towering presence as he looks up from the child's perspective. The emotional memory of his own childhood merges with the visual image of the character, the image being the grandpa's plea. And the other seeing subclass category, the interviewee sees in his mind a life-worn, wrinkled old man whose consciousness drifts from place to place. When the old man opens his eyes, it is as if a child is looking through them. The mind has cracked open in a way that allows the child to emerge again. The screenwriter perceives this visually from slightly above, leaning toward the old man, whose head has sunk into the hospital pillow. The wrinkled face is motionless at first. He sees the scene not through a camera, but through his own gaze, through a felt presence. To the screenwriter, the character appears as a real person, fragile and true. Even though the character is entirely fictional, he experiences him as real, as genuine human being before him. The screenwriter does not view the scene through the character's eyes, nor even as a writer. He experiences it simply as a human being through his own presence. There is no intention or perspective to construct. It is a moment of pure recognition of humanity. And then there's this subcategory location, which are partly reiterated. His place in memory. The screenwriter finds himself back in the kitchen of his childhood home. The mother is cooking there. He approaches her to ask for that reassurance, the same question the grandpa asks, am I a good boy? I am a good boy, aren't I? And the scene and the memory overlap. And the other subclass category, his place in the scene. In the imagined scene, the screenwriter stands beside the hospital bed, roughly at the old man's waist level, leaning slightly over the bedside. The screenwriter bends forward, watching to see whether the old man is still breathing, still conscious. His gaze rests on the old man. He is there beside him, observing closely and with concern. And then the feeling of worry, which is now reiterated because I moved it. In the memory in the childhood kitchen, the interviewee feels a kind of worry, a concern that he, for some reason, has not been good enough or sufficient. There is a sense of not being accepted, of not being worthy. In the memory, he approaches the mother, seeking reassurance, wanting to hear, am I a good boy? Do you love me, don't you? You do love me, don't you? The interviewer receives some kind of affirmation from the mother, but it does not fill him. The feeling does not fade. Although the mother reacts in some way, it is not in a way that would be sufficient for a child. The emotional needs remains unfulfilled. The reassurance does not reach him deeply enough. So, I want to see you now. Are you awake? This is where I have kind of reached in my analysis at the moment, and I wonder. I hope you got something out of this. It was a long speech, but I hope that the report of what the interviewees, what the screenwriters have experienced during those maybe 2 or 3 seconds while they were reading their own script kind of opens up for you how extremely powerful this method is. I don't know, maybe you want to say something at this point.
Okay, so we can have a discussion now. If anyone has, or Kirsi, in the beginning, you mentioned that after your talk, you want a couple of minutes to rest.
Yeah, maybe you want to pause or
we can have a discussion now.
Yeah, we can do that too. It's fine.
Okay, so let's start the discussion. If anyone has any comments or questions.
Yeah. Yeah, that was so much to take in, to be honest.
Sorry.
No, it was great. A lot. It really gave me food for thought. Yeah, but it's just like I felt myself drifting off thinking about one thing, and then you said something else was really interesting. So there's just like so much to take in. So my first question is, I guess, to Jan actually. Will this be available to go back through again and read, because there was like awful lot to take in one go? Will the recording be made?
Yeah. I want to publish the recording on the SRN YouTube channel.
Fantastic.
So it will be available,
Okay.
and I'm not sure if Kirsi is open to share her slides.
Yeah, absolutely. You can do that.
Yeah. Fantastic. Yeah, I just felt myself wanting to take so many notes and couldn't take notes while I was listening at the same time. But so many brilliant ideas there. Loved it. Really, really good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Yes, please.
I'm participating from Istanbul. Thank you very much for your presentation. It was very rich in a lot of new thoughts. As a writer, I turned back to myself, and then I found the opportunity to analyze my experience in writing something, and when I felt so down, or better, when I was writing something and where the cue was in myself. So it was very interesting. I will think on that. And regarding the sustainability as a much bigger context, there's also a lot of issues in violence and communication of the violence through cinema and TV. We have a lot of problems here also with the youth. That part was also interesting for me. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for listening and being there.
Okay, maybe I have a question. The method you were talking, is it rather a research method, or you're developing some tool which could help screenwriters to write? What is it?
Well, there has been ideas, but yeah, but I think that the also one strength of this method is actually meeting in like face to face and being there body. Well, the screenwriters that I've interviewed, some, I don't know, maybe 12 altogether, they have been very happy to be there and realize how rich their experience has been during the, because they haven't been aware of it. And I think this is absolutely not a therapy method. That is strictly forbidden, but still it's kind of screenwriter therapy, you know. So for example, one of my informants came afterwards to thank me. We went into her childhood memory also. This is quite common. We go into a childhood memory that the screenwriter hasn't realized during her writing or even reading again this scene, that they had used the childhood memory. And this screenwriter thanked me because she realized how important this scene. Well, it was once again one of those scenes that really felt something to me while I was reading, sorry. That she just had a discussion with the producer and the director about this, and they wanted to change it. And because of my interview, she knew that it cannot be changed because everything she has put in that script is in that scene, even though she didn't realize it before my interview. So this is not therapy at all, but it's making writers more conscious about their methods and what they use and how they put their souls and their, I don't know, heart blood, as we say in Finnish, into the drama and into the story. So I mean, with this method, you can show that screenwriting is an art form. It's not like being a designer. What I think we are handled as designers, more or less nowadays. The industrial designers that have that or dramaturge. So do you follow what I mean? we can make explicit what happens there. We can make explicit also what it contains, what this scene, for example, what it contains. Why is it there? But I don't think this could be reduced into a computer program. No, because this is human interaction. Very much.
Okay. So is it possible that in future, after your PhD, you will it will be possible to hire you and use this method to reflect on someone's writing?
Yeah, for example, I think, yeah. Except for the thing is that you can also do interview on yourself, but this takes a lot of skills, so that you don't get confused with your memories and the memories of the memory, or the, you know, you see the picture. But somebody has been talking about making a ChatGPT program on doing self-interview, which would be nice because there's a distance already there. But if you're well trained in this method, you can do self-interview too, which is it's fruitful also. But yeah, I love to doing this. So I love doing this. So yeah, I very much like to interview.
And when you mentioned the AI tool, are you thinking about developing one?
No. Tools are not really my interest in that sense. I like the interaction, the human interaction in this. That is the richness.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments or questions?
I would have a question. I think you said you interviewed about like 12 screenwriters, right? And I was wondering, how did you find these screenwriters? Did you know them before, or did you reach out to them? Yeah.
Yeah, well, I know all the screenwriters in Finland. So I mean, I used to be the chair for the Screenwriters Guild here, so I know them personally. So that's not the problem, no. And they are happy to participate. And they are and you can understand that this interview method is not easy for the interviewee either. So I'm thinking about redoing this reading exercise with the same interviewees, just focusing on a shorter moment, for example, this transportation, and going even deeper into that. Because here you can see that in the report there are not much. Well, the grandpa screenwriter reported quite a lot of bodily sensations, but the other one didn't. And my research question, I think, is a little too wide here also. So because I'm looking at all the experience in that scene, or reading that scene, and I could only concentrate on the transportation, or I could only concentrate on the eureka moments. But of course, reading one's own script doesn't produce eureka moments, but writing does. And you can see that you can kind of do research in almost anything with this, what has an experience on it. So I don't know, you could use this method to show, for example, a financier, do the same on a financier, and ask what happens when you read this scene. For example, well, it could be a battered woman or whatever, a killed horse, and really do interview on how did you experience reading that scene, what happened there while you read that scene, and make it explicit if they really want it there. I don't know. You could do that. You can do anything with this. Which has to do with experience. But as in my first paper on the violence of women, that was, I mean, that was very frustrating and really frightening, actually, to try to reach to the financiers and producers, and they refuse to participate. So we must think that what are we using this very strong technology, which is audiovisual production, to kind of form the world view for the audience. But as said, the one investor said that it's the old, as long as there are old school men that decide. So we can do that. My question is, what can we do? So what do you think? We go now to the ecology in screenwriting question. What can you do? Really, we don't have power. Those who have the money have the power. Have the power. So
yeah, in the beginning. Sorry. In the beginning, you mentioned buyers and streaming companies, and I was thinking if the opportunity for writers could be in short videos, micro dramas, and YouTube videos, which are you can reach huge amount of people in audience through these channels, and you don't need buyers. What do you think?
That's true. That's true. Yeah, I don't know, but well, AV production is also about profit. I mean, it's about money. So, well, I don't have the answers. I don't think anybody has the answers.
So, do anyone want to comment, or any other questions in the audience? Yes, Heidi.
Hi, Kirsi. I just wanted to. I'm sorry that I got late into this meeting. I had a course to teach, but I just wanted to say that it seems like a really gentle method that you are suggesting, and also from the few things I know about this method you are presenting here, it seems like really important that it's a gentle method. And I was glad that Jan asked if it was a research method or like tools for the screenwriters. It could be both. And I think when working with tools for the screenwriters, it's so important that they are exactly gentle and perhaps also individual. Because if we try to do the tools, there is a need to develop tools that are more general and like reaching out for more screenwriters. At least that is what I think. But we have problems when we try to make the tools broader. So I think it's actually very nice that you stick to saying that it's important for me to interview. It's an individual thing, and it's a gentle way of getting knowledge of these really, really important processes. So I just wanted to acknowledge that.
Yeah, thank you. And nice to see you lady here too. So yeah, but transformation is always, it starts from the individual, I think. And I just found a very interesting thing called transformative learning theory. I think it's becoming huge, and it's been used in the economics, for example, for a more sustainable economic world. And I could look into that more closely and try to think how this method could be used in this transformative learning concept. So I think there are things happening, kind of subtly, but finally, and maybe soon more broadly. I don't know. A transformative learning theory developed by Jack Mezirow.
And could you tell more about transformative learning theory?
Not really, because I just found it. I just popped into a economist, lady economist in Finland that uses that and talks about sustainable economy. So I have to read more about it before I can talk about it.
Yeah, of course. So, are there some more comments or questions from the audience? So we have no more questions, no more comments. So I would like to thank you all for attending, and thank you, Kirsi, for your lecture. It's gonna be online hopefully soon, and I believe anyone can contact Kirsi afterwards via email and discuss her research in more detail. So thank you all, and
thank you.
See you soon.
See you soon again, hopefully. Thanks for being here. Heidi, can we exchange the emails in the near future? Thanks. Yeah.